oh my gosh, no, I forgot. And I was like, okay, well, it is what it is now. Right. Well, cool. Cool. Kyleigh, thanks for joining me. We met in Ship 30 for 30. I've had a few people be willing to come on my podcast out of that. It was a really great networking tool, but you're building Herald, you have Promptly, you have a habit tracker, right? A few other things going on. But thanks for coming to the show. And why don't you just like introduce yourself and tell us everything you have going on and what you all got going on.
Yeah, so I'm Kyleigh, as you said. I'm doing full-time indie making now. So before I was working for various startups. I started in UX research, then I did UX design and UI design, and then a little bit of product management. And the whole time working for those startups, I always had my own ideas that I wanted to build. But I never really had the skill set or the means to do so. So I was just, working for other people. And then when no code came along, or when I discovered no code, I finally realized that I could start bringing some of my ideas to life. So Herald was the first one that I started like beginning of the pandemic, when we all had suddenly extra time to kill.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of started as a side project and went from there. And then this year in March, the startup I was working for shut down. So I got laid off. I got some severance, which was nice. But yeah, and I kind of had some traction on Herald. So I just, instead of jumping right into a job search, I decided to take a year and try to grow Herald and try to make it as an indie maker. So.
Oh, that's pretty sweet. So, yeah, no code is like getting really big, but I don't know. I still can't figure no code out because, you go to sites like like Webflow or like Bubble and it's no code, but then I'm like, yeah, this is still way too complicated for me. But I'm curious, like, what got you into kind of indie making specifically? I mean, I know you came from like a UX UI background, but like go like take us all the way back. Like what got you into like tech and what made you kind of want to start specifically like habits? Like is that something that you intentionally went into or was that something you kind of fell into?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I studied cognitive science in college.
Okay.
So I think that's where a lot of the ideas for Herald came from. We talked we studied a lot about like human motivation and habit change and behavior change. So I've always had an interest in that. And then yeah, so with Herald, I just kind of realized that the other habit trackers weren't working for me. Like I had read all this research in school and after school that said tracking your habits or your behavior can really help you make change. It just makes you more self-aware. And they've done all these studies and proven that's a really good behavior change tactic. But I could never consistently track. Like I would try to do it in my journal. I would create like this whole like table, like, oh, I'm going to track all this stuff. And I just wouldn't track. Like the most I would track would be for 2 days and then I would forget about it.
Oh,
So I was trying to figure out something that would work for me. And that's where the text idea, I'm not really sure where that came from. Maybe I just saw some other SMS products starting to bubble up. And so I thought like, well, that might work for me because I'm already checking my text messages and, yeah, so I built it for myself, really. But yeah, I think it's that original interest in psychology and cognitive science is where all that comes
yeah,
from.
habits are a crazy thing and definitely like tracking your habits. It's so funny, but I've got Herald. I use it. Probably not. I only have two, but I should probably get the other two because I think you can do four, right? I
Mhm.
should definitely get the other four. But it was funny because I'm using Herald and I'm reading. I read two books on habit, like The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and then Atomic Habits. And
Mhm.
like watching Herald and reading these books, I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then just talking
Yeah.
with like other business owners, how important it is because I'm like you, like I wanted to track my habits. I got into like Notion and tried to
Mhm.
like build like a crazy Notion template.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, but I can't do that. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah. You
just
end up like
so
spending more time building the template and then like you don't actually use it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then yeah, and then you like, yeah, what do I do with it now? Now I got this really cool thing that I can't use or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's interesting though. But how do you so I mean that's really cool, like coming from habits. Um, what's kind of like your future with Harold? Like what do you want it to like turn into and kind of with your like indie making process? I mean, I know you got build in public with Twitter with Promptly and things
Mhm.
like that. So I mean, kind of like where are you going? Like what are like the some of the visions?
Yeah. So the goal is to have my products generate enough income so that I don't have to get a full-time job.
Yeah.
Um, that's like goal number one. And so like whether that's Herald that gets me there or the different product, um, doesn't really matter to me. Like that goal, the overall goal is just the independence and being able to like work on what I want to work on and um, create products that help people. So with Herald right now, it's been pretty slow but steady growth, and I tried like I think that was like the biggest challenge was like I had this good product, people liked it, people were using it, but I'm not that skilled in marketing. Like my career, I've always done the design and the product
Uh-huh.
management, but I've never touched the marketing. So all of a sudden I was like, shoot, I don't have the skills to really like take this next level. So I tried learning a bunch about SEO and I even tried going on TikTok and like figuring out how that works. And I just realized it was a lot to learn. And I just, I realized that Herald also didn't really lend itself to many like growth loops or like growth engines because the audience, this was at least like the conclusion I came to. It's just like the audience is a
Mhm.
little broad. Like everybody can track habits or like wants to improve their habits. Like if I were to describe my
Yeah.
target audience, it would be like people interested in self-improvement, which is just really
Yeah.
vague and broad. So it's hard to target those people. And it's also hard to like recommend like a self-help product. Like I think it's not a product that you're gonna recommend to a friend. It's because that's kind of weird. You're kind of saying like, oh, you need to get your stuff together. Like it's just kind of weird. Unless they like come to you and they're having a hard
Yeah.
time, you could recommend it.
Yeah.
But otherwise it's not really something that spreads by word of mouth. So I kind of realized some challenges with the marketing with that. So I've kind of put that on hold. I'm gonna relaunch it Herald 2.0 in
Oh, heck yeah.
January and try to get those
Okay.
people that are starting to think about New Year's resolutions. So I have some
Heck
things
yeah.
planned, but yeah, I've started to experiment with new ideas like Promptly, Indie Maker Club, or what did I name it? Indie Habit Club.
Oh,
And
that's
just
right.
trying
Yeah,
to see.
Habit Club.
Yeah, so it's very early stages with those. Like I'm still just experimenting and prototyping and trying to figure out if there's a product there. So
Yeah. Well, you know, that's interesting. Like to go back on your kind of thought process because like I've introduced it to a few people. Like I'm like, hey, you should go check out Habit Harold because I've met some business owners where they're like, man, I just need to like stay on track with stuff. And I'm like,
mhm,
yeah, you can set this up to kind of like also track your habits, but also like help like be a reminder, like, hey, did you remember to do this? Like, hey, you know what I mean?
mhm,
But it's interesting, like, why do you think because I agree with you. I think now that you say that, I'm like, yeah, people don't really go up like I'm having a hard time like with my habits, right? It's just kind of a
mhm,
it's kind of a funky conversation to have. Why do you think it's maybe not taboo, but like
mhm.
just one that you don't want to have? Just
Yeah,
from
that's
like
a good
your end
question.
back
And
the back end of Harold.
yeah, that's a good question, and thank you for recommending him, by the way. I appreciate that. Um, yeah, I'm not really sure, like, maybe because, like, we all feel like we have to have our stuff together all the time, um, and so, like, it's yeah, it's not fun to admit that, like, we're struggling with maybe even, like, some simple things,
Yeah.
and yeah, habits are I also learned is, like, they're really personal, like, one
Mm,
growth loop I was exploring was like, oh, maybe if I give people like really cool graphs their progress. Like they'll want to share that on Twitter or something, because that would be a great way
Mm,
to spread the word. And so I sent
yeah.
my top users, I created them graphs and I sent it to them like, here you go, like share it if you want, kind of. And like no one shared it. And when I followed up and asked why they didn't share it with anyone, I heard back that like, well, it's just like a private thing, my habits. Like for example, I think like
Mm,
some people's habits are like flossing or like remembering to brush my teeth, or
mm.
like it's just like
Yeah.
not things that you're gonna be like, hey, I've flossed. Like, it's just um, small personal things sometimes. So
Yeah,
um,
that's funny.
yeah,
Yeah, but that's strange. But like for me, like I have no like I don't know. I guess what is it? Shame is the right. Like I don't have any shame. Like I gotta be like,
yeah,
yeah, I didn't do my 20 push-ups or whatever. But I just think I'm also light with myself. Like I don't take myself too seriously and I just like keep going. But that's interesting though. Some people, yeah, I guess some people could use that for like really personal stuff. You could get down into like, because what is that? James Clear talks about habits almost in the same, almost interchangeably with like addiction. And
hmm
so, if you're reading that book and you find Harold, then you might be trying to like, overcome some stuff like that. So, yeah, that makes sense. And another question I wanted to ask you, because I'm not a marketer either. Like, I think it's, I found myself in these writing groups like Ship 30 for 30 because I
hmm
just wanted to write. Like, I was like, look, if I can just write and kind of build an audience and things like that, that'll be good enough for me right now. And we can get everything else figured out later. But you've heard of like, it's almost super cliche to say like niche down, right?
hmm
But there's a lot of products that you really can't like. I don't know. It's just really hard to find a niche. It's really hard to,
hmm
yeah, because like who doesn't want to build better habits? So how do you like overcome? I don't know. Or what are your thoughts on like the whole niche idea?
yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm experimenting with Indie Habit Club, is like, what if I like the same product that Harold is, but instead of targeting, yeah, everybody who's interested in self-improvement, like just target indie makers. So that's kind of my experimenting with like niching down, because again, yeah, everybody says that. It's like a very common advice you hear on Twitter. So I was like, okay, let me just actually try this and see what
Okay.
happens. So I haven't made that much progress on that one yet. I've been spending more time on Promptly, but I think it could be interesting.
Yeah.
Because then the other thing I like about that is like with Indie Habit Club, with that idea, rather than people coming up with their own habits, it's like the group decides like, okay, we're gonna work on like tweeting every day, or like journaling every day, or like different habits that would help an indie maker. Um,
Mhm.
and like the community just like chooses a different habit each month. That way the user doesn't have to come up with their habits. Because I've noticed that too, is people will sign up for Harold and then they won't set up their habits. When I followed up, I've heard like, I'm not really sure what to track, or like I'm still, or like, yeah, I'm gonna add them, and they just like don't get around to it. So I think it will take out
Yeah.
some friction too if I can just be like, hey, we're all working on journaling this month.
Yeah.
So we'll see. TBD. I'm not sure if the niching down will work. I'll have to follow back up with you.
Well, I just know, you know what I mean? Like, it was tough. Like when I built my first like product company, it was selling CBD. And this was like when CBD was like the Wild West. Like
Mhm.
you couldn't get a bank account, you couldn't get a merchant account, like nothing. You couldn't advertise anywhere. And so they were like, "Oh, well, if you niche down, you can find some people." And I just got so tired of hearing that. I was like,
I
"Yeah," but
know.
and then I was like, I'm just sick of this, right?" But it was crazy. But before I want to talk about Promptly, but before I
Mhm.
talk about Promptly, you've talked about Harold and Indie Maker kind of growing slow. And I'm wondering like how you as a creative and as a business owner stay motivated when things go slow. Because it happens with everybody, right? Like nobody's special in that respect of like I mean maybe some people build a product and it goes to the moon right away, right? But I doubt it. So I'm curious.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think what motivates me is like, I think I look at it sort of like a puzzle. Like okay, there's a right answer here. Like, how do I get growth for this product? And then, so if it's slow, I'm like just trying to figure out what's the next thing I can try. And I do like learning and trying new things. So I think that's just intrinsically motivating for me. Like when Harold was slow, I had the idea to, oh, maybe I'll try TikTok. Like I've heard that can be
Mm.
an interesting marketing tool. So I spent probably way too much time, but like 2 weeks figuring out how TikTok worked and trying to post a few videos and like ultimately realized it's not a good fit. But
Yeah.
like that was motivating and fun for me just to like, oh, I'm gonna go learn about this and see if it works. And then there's also that possibility that it does work and you just unlock something. So I think that motivates me too. But and again, like right now Harold is slow, and so I'm kind of gonna wait till January. And so I've turned my attention to promptly and other things because I'm like, maybe there's something
Yeah.
here. So it's just that like
Yeah.
curiosity, I think. Trying to just figure out what works. And then also, like, I gave myself this timeline of a year before I have to search for a job again. So I think that's also motivating, is like, I have to figure it out. I only have a couple months
That's pretty
left.
cool though.
I'm just trying to
Yeah,
try
you know
a
what?
bunch of, yeah.
Yeah, but you know what's cool about that is like I did the exact same thing. So when I was gonna write my sales book,
Mhm.
I was like, I know somebody, I heard somebody on Twitter, they were like, you can do pre-orders with this app called Gumroad. And I was like, all right. So I did a pre-order, I set up a pre-order, I did all my copy and stuff. And then I was like, December 1st. And I realized like, yeah, I would have given up so many times if I didn't have that timeline. Like, you got to have this
Mhm.
out. And like, and then the even scarier part, what was terrifying was people were actually paying for the pre-order. And I was like, oh
Mhm.
crap. Like, I really got to get
You
this
have
done.
to do it then.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and so but you know, that's to your point, right? Of having like this timeline and really like setting hard lines, and then you really have no other choice, right? It's either like get a job or make this work. And I really want this to work. So you just get more
Yeah.
creative, I feel like.
Yeah. And I think another thing that's motivating is just seeing everybody on Twitter and the fact that there's a bunch of makers sharing their progress and like sharing their numbers. And um, I was just looking at Danielle on Twitter. She's actually being featured on my blog tomorrow. So I was doing some research on her and her product, Leave Me Alone. It's like a service that helps clean up your inbox or like your email subscriptions.
Oh, cool.
Anyway, but she just passed 2,000 monthly recurring revenue. But she shows her whole
Oh,
graph from when she first started, and like the first 2 years, she's like not making more than 200 monthly recurring.
oh
So like it's
wow.
this like flat line. So like things like that are motivating as well. Like it's
Yeah.
okay that it's low because like all it takes is unlocking one thing in the business model or the product, and then you can really see growth take off. So I think that's also a key motivating factor.
Yeah, and not only that, but it's cool. Like that journey is cool. And when you find a product and you realize that like, you know, I'm just hearing about this, but at the same time they've been going forever. That you know, that's also like some credibility. Like they're here to stick around. They're here for the long haul. I think there's a lot of really cool things in that. So talk to us
Yeah.
now about Promptly because I know there's a waiting list for it. I know it's helping people build in public. Can you explain that a little bit more? And what you're
Yeah.
trying to do with it and what the vision is for it?
Yeah. So it's really early. I had this idea a month ago. So I'm still in the prototyping phase. But basically, throughout my process of working on Herald, I've been using Twitter a lot as a tool to build in public and to get some organic customers. And another like common advice that everyone says on Twitter is like be consistent. You have to like tweet every day or like 5 times a day. And that was always hard for me. Like it was more like waves. Like I'd get really motivated one day and I would tweet 10 times and then I wouldn't tweet for a couple days. And I wouldn't really know like what to post or why. So sometimes I would just like throw stuff at the wall and I didn't really feel like I
Yeah.
knew what I was doing. Um, and so with Promptly, I'm trying to solve that problem. So I'm trying to help indie makers tweet more consistently, and also just help them
Oh,
give
okay.
them a little more structure for like how to build in public and what things to write. So yeah, it was another example of me solving my own problem. So
So
we'll
like,
see.
ideas to tweet, like generated ideas, like
Yeah. So
kind of like a calendar, or how would you? Yeah.
yeah. So the flow is right now is you get an email every day, and the email links to a prompt, a build in public prompt, like share something you're struggling with, or share some recent numbers or stats, or like what are your priorities for this week. And right now I'm using Tally for those prompts, so you can just like respond to the prompt, and then it formats a tweet for you. And
Oh, no
ideally,
way.
eventually, it will like auto tweet for you. So you could just
Oh,
like press done and it
wow.
would automatically tweet. But right now, it's still a prototype, so you have to just basically copy and paste into Twitter. But yeah, it's like the prompt, so it's helping with the idea generation, but it's also helping with the consistency, ideally, because it's coming to your inbox. So
Yeah.
it's like kind of like responding to an email, like just type it really quick, get it done. And now at least you have like one tweet done for the day.
Yeah, that's really cool, because that's kind of my thing, right? Is like, you got to stay consistent with Twitter, because you hear that all the time, and quantity. It's almost like quantity over quality. Like the quality will be there, but that's really cool. That's a great problem to solve. What would be really cool with that too
Hmm.
is LinkedIn. Like, I don't know, LinkedIn has just become like a writing place. You know,
Hmm.
lots of
Yeah.
people go there to write, but everybody has the same problem. And that's so cool that you have this promptly, because it's the same problem for everybody. It's like, what do I tweet about? I don't
Yeah.
know, man. Unless you're like this super wealthy individual who hires a couple VAs, because some of them do that. Like, some of them just
Yeah.
like, hey, you got you three, or you figure it out. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah. And there's some tools now that like uses AI to help you format things, but
Yeah.
I really want to like, I think what you brought up was an important point, like the quantity. It feels like we're being advised to like aim for quantity over quality a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I definitely want to help with quantity, but I don't want to lose quality, because I'm already seeing that a little bit on Twitter. I think now that there are these AI tools, like some of the tweets
Yeah.
are like, it's just the same thing that you've like read a bunch of times. Or like, I don't know, it's more like
Yeah.
generic wisdom versus like the person's actual story, or like an example of that wisdom. Like, I know the wisdom, but I want to like read about people actually applying that or experiencing
Yeah.
that. And like, so I'm hoping the prompts will also help with that quality piece. And that's what I'm also iterating on, is like, what are the prompts that are going to spark like really good stories or insights?
I like that, because that's kind of the idea, right? And if I can just go a little bit on this podcast, like, the whole
Mhm.
reason I created this podcast was for like that, right? So that business owners could share like their real stories.
Mhm.
And because, yeah, I mean, you have like all the big podcasts, and I listen to them and you listen to them, right? Like, we all listen to like Gary Vee, and I don't know if you listen to Joe Rogan, that's a big one, right? Or
Mhm.
um Guy Raz, or any of these guys, or
Yeah.
My First Million, these guys, right? And it's cool
Yeah.
to have all these really successful people tell their success stories. But what was cool for me, and what you brought up, is that
Mhm.
you have the same stories. Like, we could all write the same book, and people, like, your story will resonate with people where, like, Sam Parr or Sean Puri, like, those stories might not resonate with the same people. And so helping your story get out there is super important.
Yeah. And when you're on those bigger podcasts, like some of those answers seem like more workshopped or something. Like they might have told the same story on a ton of different podcasts, or like, so I think it's cool that what you're
Yeah.
doing, like a little smaller,
It's feeling
small
authentic,
indie
yeah.
makers like me.
Yeah. Well, that's
Cool.
it, right? Yeah, that's one of the that's the slogan for the podcast is a podcast for the little guys because
Yeah,
nobody gets their shot. And this isn't a big podcast by any means, but it's cool. Everybody gets a shot. We get to go
totally.
live. One or two people watch, and then we get to go home and forget about it. So that's really cool though, and I really appreciate it. So I'm curious though. Were you always gonna? I mean, you went to school for UX UI. Is this what you thought you were gonna be when you grow up?
That's a good question. I don't think so, because I didn't really know that it was a possibility.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I really started with psychology and cognitive science just because I thought it was interesting, and that actually led me to the UX and UI stuff because I just saw people in my class who were studying cog sci, but then they were going to San Francisco for the summer and interning at startups and doing UX design. And I'm like, what is that?
Why
um,
were they doing that?
yeah, I mean, they were like
That's
really
pretty
ahead of the
crazy.
game. But I remember looking at their like UX portfolios and just thinking it was so cool and like I want to do UX design. So I started there and then um, worked at a product agency for a while. And I heard Sahil, how do I say his name?
Oh, Sahil or
He wrote
Bloom
the
or
Minimal
yeah,
Entrepreneur or the
yeah.
Minimalist. It's one of those names that I like read all the time, but I don't say out loud. But he
Nope, I'm with you.
But he said too, like if you're working at an agency or you're working at startups, like it's inevitable that you're going to have your own ideas too. So that's sort of just what happened with me too. And yeah, I think it was just seeing other people on Twitter making a living off their own little side projects was what
Yeah.
really like made that a possibility in my mind. So,
Oh
but yeah,
yeah,
I don't think
that's
I would
really
have
cool.
thought of that. I didn't know that was a possibility back in the day.
Well, I agree with you, and I just like to ask that question because some people's stories are cool. They were laser focused. Like I had this one guy tell me, 3 years old, I knew exactly what I was gonna do, and I'm like, that's crazy. And then, but I like these stories too because I tell people that in high school. Like sometimes I'll talk with younger entrepreneurs coming up and younger creatives coming up, and I'm
Mhm.
like, you guys got to slow down and just. They're like, what should my 5 and 10 year goals be? And I'm like, man, I don't even know what the internet looks like in 10 years. It could be
Yeah,
Web3. It could be something totally different. You know what I
yeah,
mean? We could have
yeah.
like this weird combo of like what we're doing now and Web3, and it's like, man, this is bananas. But for you, there was it sounds like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like there was a silver lining when you lost your position in the fact that you got to start these new adventures, these new
Mm.
products, these new companies. What surprised you the most? What surprised you the most about starting your own company and being an indie maker and a solopreneur?
Yeah. Yeah, it was like a silver lining. Like it was good that I already had some traction on the side. Um,
Yeah,
and I think it would have been ideal to kind of like keep working somewhere and continue doing it on the side, just for like more stability. But the opportunity just presented itself. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do this full time. But I think
and
what
take it.
surprised me the most was, I mean, I think just how like hard marketing was, or like how hard marketing part was going to
Oh yeah,
be. I think I just wasn't um, realistic about that. Like I was really confident in my UX and my product skills that like I was confident that I could build a product that people would like and people would use and it would help people. And then I think that's as far as my brain went. And then like once I had that with Harold, it was like, shoot, now I have to figure out how to market this thing.
yeah.
So that was kind of a wake up call, but it was good. Like I wouldn't have learned that otherwise. So it was good that I went through that process. And now with Promptly and um, Indie Habit Club, I'm like thinking of the marketing way earlier, and that's part of the reason
Oh
why
yeah.
I like promptly, or the promptly idea is because if it's auto tweeting for people, then I can kind of have a little promptly tag on the end, and like that can be a growth loop. So like I'm already thinking of growth loops, whereas with Harold, I was just like focused on the product. And a lot of people say that. They say they focus on their product way too much their first time around, and I did that.
Oh, well, yeah, I think everybody, I think if you don't do that, it's great, you know, I think you're crazy because
Yeah,
you do. Like your first product, like I still have when we had our CBD, you know, we had like these badass labels. It was cool. I still
yeah,
have 3 of them, and the company's dead. You know what I mean? But I was like, this is cool.
yeah,
But yeah, everything I started since is like, okay, no, we got to validate this. We got to make sure that what we're doing is going to work.
yeah. Because I think I realized like for a while I was getting, and I'm still getting organic customers like through Twitter and stuff, but um, that's not like a sustainable growth. Like that's dependent on like how often I'm tweeting and like
Hmm.
how good my tweets are. So it's just like this constant grind. Whereas like you kind of need some sort of growth loop, sustainable growth loop that's gonna fuel it um, on its own. Like, and then you
Hmm.
can do tweets, you can do product cut launches to help like jumpstart that. But like you need some sort of sustainable model that's not dependent on just like hours and hours of work or money or whatever. So
Yeah, just some automation that can get everything going. Yeah, I totally. Yeah, that's super cool. Well, shoot, now I'm gonna have to get promptly because you know I'm in Twitter, and you know I'm trying to do all this stuff, and
yeah.
goodness,
Yeah.
goodness.
It's
And by the
similar, it's in
way,
the same vein as Harold. Like it's all they're both about like consistency and
yeah,
helping those of us that like struggle with those things sometimes. So
no, that's really cool. And by the way, I'm totally gonna. I think I messed up your name when I started, and I'm terrible with names, so like, please forgive me.
it's
Kyleigh,
all good. I would say like 50% of the time people say Kaylee, so I take both. It's fine.
but it's Kyleigh.
It's Kylie, yeah.
Okay, Kyleigh. Okay, cool. I'm like, ah, dude. Of course, I would forget that. Um,
No,
yeah,
it's
this is
all
crazy.
good.
But
My dad even
well,
says like Kaylee sometimes. I'm like, Dad,
all right, cool.
no problem.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, no, it sounds like you got a lot of really cool things going on. It sounds like everything, you know, it's really fun. It's really fun. So, who are some of your, and I know we're going to wrap up soon, but who are some of like your inspirations, and what's some of the, I mean, you're doing all this. I mean, obviously it's fun, but is there something that we're all missing? Like, are you doing this for a higher purpose or a bigger reason? I know there's 2 questions in there, but you can answer whichever
Yeah.
one you want first.
Yeah. We'll answer the first one in terms of people I look up to. Um, and there's a ton, and I almost want to refer to them like by their Twitter handles because I feel like I'm going to mess up their names. But Steph Smith is a big one.
Yeah.
She is so awesome, and her work inspired a lot of Harold as well. She wrote this really great article, "How to Be Great, Just Be Good Repeatedly." And that was a big inspiration. Um, 3 Hour Coffee, Marie on Twitter.
Oh, wow.
She has a productivity app. It's doing really well. So that's really motivating. And she builds in public and all that. So she's awesome. Pretty much everybody I've had on my Maker of Habit newsletter.
Yeah,
Um,
like, yeah, that newsletter is cool. I like that newsletter.
yeah, just had Michelle last week. She's working on um, I'm getting mixed up now.
All good.
Type Dream. I wanted to say Tally, but it's
Okay.
Type Dream.
Okay.
And what's his name? His handle is like Doctor, like DR.
Oh,
Dan Roden. Dan Roden is super cool. Yeah. Um,
okay.
just
Yeah,
the whole
I
Twitter
do. I get
thing.
the I get the Twitter handles mixed up too. I'm like, oh shoot, I'm gonna try to talk to these people and totally not know who I'm talking to.
Yeah. Well, it's like you're so used to seeing their handle.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like, um, yeah.
that's
But yeah,
cool.
everyone on Twitter is just amazing. Our little build in public community is just really anyone who's building in public is just really motivating. So
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, I'm gonna have to get on there because for me it's like okay, build in public, and I don't. So, what does that mean? When you say build in public, what do you mean? What do you look for in somebody
yeah,
who is really good at building in public?
yeah. It's a good question because yeah, I think that term gets thrown around and people mean
Yeah.
different things. But for me, building in public is like specifically on Twitter, people who are sharing their process about building a product or a business. So that includes sharing their revenue and like big milestones. It also includes like their thought process, how they're making decisions, or um, yeah, any new features they added and why. So it's really just showing your whole process of building a product. And then it's also so that's kind of just a style of tweeting or like what to tweet is build in public. There's like a hashtag that you can go to that people use, hashtag build in public. So you can see people that are doing it. Um, but yeah, it's just like
Yeah.
a
Just
practice
like
of
just
sharing
showing
your
people.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of like opening the curtains, like really
Yeah.
transparent. Like
Yeah.
what you see is what you get, kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. And like not being afraid to share new ideas because someone's going to steal it or not afraid to share your
Oh,
revenue or anything like that. It's just like, yeah, opening up your
yeah,
doors, exactly
yeah.
like you said. Yeah.
That's funny. I wrote a tweet about that the other day about somebody wanting to steal ideas because I do like little business consulting on the side, and I don't know
Hmm.
how many NDAs I've signed. I've signed like a few where they're like,
Hmm.
okay, but you can't steal my idea, and I'm like, homie, you don't have an idea. You got
Yeah.
something like I got. This is like I got a whole book of them, man. Like
Yeah.
they're worth as much as the paper you write them on, but I'll sign it,
Yeah.
whatever you want.
Yeah. And
It's
you
just
really don't
funny to
realize
me.
that until you've like to, until you've tried to take an idea into something like you don't really realize that like an idea is just an idea.
Yeah,
Yeah, because you don't have an appreciation for how hard it is to figure out all the other parts. So,
yeah, exactly, exactly. I just laugh. They're like, I don't want anybody to steal my idea, and I'm like, I don't think anybody wants this. Like, do you even know who
yeah.
wants it? That's funny. That's cool. Well,
Yeah.
all right. So you got. So I know you're short on time. So right before you leave, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, and then where they can find your products, and how they can get Herald or get up for signed up for Promptly or whatever you want them to know.
Yeah, so I'm at Bagels and Granola on Twitter, and that's where I'm sharing my progress and my daily updates. So that's a great place. And then if you wanna track any habits, heyitsharold.com. There's a 7-day free trial, so you can just try it out and see what it's all about. Um, Promptly, there's a wait list for that, but if you're interested in tweeting more consistently or building in public, you can sign up for that wait list at promptly.so. You can also DM me if you really want to try it out. I have a prototype I'm playing with. I have a few people testing it out with me. So, yeah, get on the wait list or just DM me. But yeah, Twitter's where everything is happening. So
Well,
that's the
cool.
best
Well,
place.
thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and this
Thank
is
you.
fun.
This
Thank
has
you.
been so fun. I appreciate it.